made beer here? That guy. Hot liquor tank. We're going to call liquor water for this example. If you're making beer, you should call it liquor because you might treat this with minerals, make it taste like some foreign country. So, make hot liquor, crack some grain. That grain's going to be called grist. Dump that grain in here. Mix the hot liquor with the grist, and now you have a product called wort. But you want to make booze. So, what you're going to do is you're going to put the wort in here. It's going to come out here. It's going to recirculate through the shower head over the grain, and we are going to have a chemical reaction called saccharification. We are going to sacrifice the nutritional capacity for beer. Just some of the nutritional capacity though. So anyway, once we do this for about an hour, we now have our first runnings of wort. The first runnings of wort go over there. We take the remaining hot water, we dump it over here, we make our second runnings of wort, we go over there, and now we can start talking about boiling. But for style, we might have already started boiling with our first runnings of beer. It depends on what we want to do. This is like making chili. You pull the levers, and you always have some way to control this process. Every step of the way, it gives you something to change about your product. So, we generally will start over here with a very boozy wort. We'll come over here and we'll modify that with a boil process, up to and including pre-boiling the strongest wort we have. So, once we have our final boil volume over here, we're going to commence with the main part of the boil. For us, again, to talk about style points, we're going to generally tend to boil longer. We like our beers malty, and if we're going to make a hoppy IPA, those longer boils help us get that bitterness and whatnot. But we don't always boil our beer. We sometimes make what's called a raw beer. I'm kind of getting in the weeds of our style here. A raw beer for us is a beer that has been pasteurized. That is it. Stylistically speaking, the BJCP says you can boil for about 20 minutes. We have a little history-minded brewing philosophy, so for us it is more appropriate to not boil that beer when we do a raw beer. I'm going to step forward and we're going to go back to this kettle over here. We're going to talk about the boil again. After that 90-minute boil, we're going to crash it out. We're going to bring that temperature down to where we can pitch our yeasties in there and they'll live. What we're doing right now is called a free rise ferment. We don't always do this, especially in the summer months when we're dealing with a lot of ambient heat. But in the cold weather months, we like to ferment over here. Now, it helps me with cleaning, but at the same time, it lets the yeast just kind of naturally do their thing. I would rather have a more expressive yeast bringing some flavor to my beer than I would a nice tame yeast that's just mildly fermented in the background. You can see I'm also not using a bubbler. This is a little more historically minded as well, but also I don't use an oxygen stone. I'm going to get oxygen in there by whirlpooling my wort at the end when I'm chilling it, and this is going to allow the wort to breathe a little bit. Your yeasties do need a bit of oxygen, and a bit of oxygen is never a bad thing to develop some flavor. If you ever have a bottle of wine that you let sit, what you want to have happen is several chemical processes, one of which is oxidization. So a little bit of oxygen, good. Too much, very bad. Also, it's expensive to get oxygen. That noise. Our ancestors wanted to get drunk in the most efficient way possible. They didn't have oxygen stones, but they figured some stuff like this out. If I wasn't using a free rise, I'd be over here with the temperature control. Even during my cold weather months, I still might use the temperature control because I have so much sugar in my beer that those yeasties will add 10 degrees easy on the outside, which means your internal temperature, if you were to have like a column through this beer, that temperature would probably be another 10 degrees hotter. So, again, this is all kind of recipe dependent, but I still might be using this in the cold weather months to deal with some of the challenges of the extra fermentable wort. Boop-a-doop-a-doo.